Presidential Council leadership calls for more international pressure on the Houthi militia. Failure to extend the UN-backed truce could complicate the conflict in Yemen. Cancer patients in Ma'rib struggle to have access to medical care due to the war. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rushan Fuad. The Presidential Leadership Council has affirmed its commitment to ending the Houthi coup. According to the Council, Yemen can never remain a hostage of the rebel militia, and that the international community should take more firm measures against them. The following report gives more details.
The Iranian-backed Houthi militants' political pressure was once again rejected by members of Yemen's Presidential Leadership Council, who urged the international community to put pressure on them to accept peace. The deputy head of the PLC and the chargé d'affaires of the Indian Embassy in Yemen, according to official sources, spoke about the recent military escalation and the militia's inflexibility of all international efforts to extend the ceasefire, which ended on October 2. He also warned that the militias are dragging the country due to their inflexibility and insistence on continuing the war against the Yemeni people, strictly in pursuit of Iran's agenda. Over 1,000 Yemenis, including soldiers and civilians, have died as a result of Houthis violating the truce. Therefore, this led to the failure to extend it. U.S. Special Envoy for Yemen, Tim Linderking, will travel to the region to support intensive UN-led negotiations with Yemeni parties to reach agreement on truce extension and expansion for the sake of Yemenis. In addition, UN Special Envoy Hans Grumberg concluded his visit to UAE, where he met the diplomatic advisor to the President, Anwar Gargash. During the meeting, the two sides discussed the recent developments in the crisis in Yemen and the international efforts to find a peaceful solution. Hundreds of thousands of people have died directly from fighting as well as indirectly, and millions have been displaced in what the UN has called the world's worst humanitarian crisis. However, the truce has also helped drop civilian casualties by 60%, and civilian displacement has decreased by over 50% during the 4-month truce. 80% of Yemen's population, or 24.1 million people, are in need of humanitarian assistance and protection as a result of the conflict, with more than 14 million of them in an urgent need. In addition, the United Nations estimates that 377,000 people have died in war as of the end of the previous year. The international community should intensify efforts to reach a resolution for the Yemeni conflict.
The failure to extend the Yemen's truce could push the country into another chapter of violence and complicate the political and military situation in the country. The following report has more details.
After a rare 6 months of relative calm, Yemen's warring sides last week failed to renew a truce deal, with calls from the United Nations for an extension falling on deaf ears. The Yemeni government accused the Houthi rebels of seeking to return the country back to a state of war and expanding its scope to include threatening navigation in the Red Sea and international oil interests in Yemen and the region. The country's Iran-backed Houthis and the government had agreed on a nationwide truce in April, the first since 2016. The 2-month truce was renewed twice, but came to an end last week over Houthis' demands as regards to public sector wakes. U.S. Special Envoy for Yemen, Tim Linderking, in a statement said, the Houthis impose impossible demands that the parties simply couldn't reach. On a larger view, the reasons behind failing the truce may turn back to Iran. The latter is under immense pressure amid raging protests at home and might be trying to keep Gulf rivals occupied with Yemen's conflict. The few months of ceasefire were a breath for millions of Yemenis who in the last 7 years of conflict were driven to acute need, according to the United Nations. The United Nations added that the last period of peace saw the monthly rate of people displaced internally dip by 76%, and the number of civilians killed or injured by fighting lowered by 54%. Yemen has been described by the United Nations as the world's biggest humanitarian crisis. The Houthis have already warned investors to steer clear of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates as they are fraught with risks, a message seen as a direct threat. Yemen's Iran-backed Houthis have previously launched attacks on the oil-rich countries, mainly targeting oil fields and key airports.
Foreign Minister Ahmed Awad bin Mubarak discussed with the Swiss Special Envoy for the Middle East, Wolfgang, the developments in Yemen. Bin Mubarak touched on the negative position of the Houthi militia towards extending the truce. For his part, the Swiss envoy affirmed his country's support for Yemen's security and stability. Malaysia has expressed concerns over missed opportunities to continue the UN-brokered ceasefire in Yemen. Malaysia urged all parties to continue to give priority to resolving the conflict peacefully through dialogue without any preconditions. It called for exercising self-restraint and taking wise measures to stop any escalation. UN Special Envoy to Yemen Hans Grunberg concluded a visit to the United Arab Emirates. The UN diplomat met Anwar Girgash and discussed the latest developments related to the Yemeni crisis. Both sides stressed the need to find a peaceful solution for the Yemeni conflict. African migrants in Yemen continue to suffer despite the United Nations interventions. The war in the country has aggravated their suffering and made them subject to violations in recruitment, especially in Houthi-controlled areas. The following report has more details.
Yemen used to open its arms to migrants throughout the years, Ethiopians and Somalians and other countries. Yet, since the start of the conflict with the hard living conditions, it's not as safe as before for the migrants. And despite this fact, at least 28,000 people have crossed from the Horn of Africa to war-torn Yemen in the first 5 months in 2022. The rise in arrivals is cause for alarm in a country now grappling with its 8th year of the conflict. In Ma'rib, 25 kilometers from one of the conflict's front line, there are 4,000 stranded migrants, unable to continue their journey onward or return back. A variety of factors may be influencing this year's increase, including a loosening of travel restrictions and the security situation in Ethiopia, where most migrants originate from. Therefore, the UN has arranged the return of more than 1,080 migrants from Yemen this year. Yemen's first UN migrant flight leaves Sana'a Airport. The UN's International Organization for Migration, IOM, arranged the voluntary return of more than 1,080 mostly East African migrants from Yemen in 2022, all from airports controlled by the Yemen's internationally recognized government in Aden and Ma'rib. Many of the passengers flying from Sana'a to Addis Ababa on Tuesday were unaccompanied minors and people with medical conditions. About 43,000 migrants are thought to be stranded in Yemen, almost all arriving with the intention of traveling north to neighboring Saudi Arabia. Migrants are regularly killed in crossfire, detained or enlisted as fighters by Yemen's warring factions. More than 40,000 landed on Yemen's shores this year, according to the International Organization Migration. A third of them are women and children. Those arriving are mostly escaping from conflicts, famine and strict governments that have long gripped several countries across the Horn of Africa, including Somalia and Ethiopia. And even their safe place now is in danger, where Yemenis and non-Yemenis are affected. Will they get the needed help before it gets worse? This is what we hope for.
The Health and Population Office in Taiz recorded 1,455 cases of dengue fever in the governorate since the beginning of October. According to the data of the office, the number of people infected with the epidemic since the beginning of this year rose to 8,428 cases, including 5 deaths. Cancer patients in Ma'rib Governorate are suffering a lot due to the lack of medical services and total government neglect. This report has more details.
Cancer patients in Ma'rib Governorate suffer from access to health care, amid attempts by the people to take the initiative and donate the land, as a gesture of hope to motivate government agencies and indulge oil companies to carry out their social responsibility. The cases are increasing. This disease that kills hundreds of citizens. And to alleviate the suffering of patients, the people of Ma'rib took the initiative by donating the land in favor of establishing a center for the treatment of cancerous tumors in Ma'rib Governorate.
What made us to donate this land? The spread of the disease and that some people can't afford the treatment costs. There is a delay in the response, and the only center is in Hadramaut. People leave the patients there and don't see them for months.
The suffering of patients increases with the lack of access to health care, as the city lacks a cancer treatment center, in addition to the absence of early checkups for cancerous hormones, and the rate of recovery from this deadly disease have been reduced.
Because of the high number of patients and the lack of treatment centers, this is why we started this initiative, cooperating with the concerned parties. And now we are taking the first steps to build this center.
A recent environmental study attributed the cases of the spread of cancer among the people in Ma'rib to environmental pollution, as a result of the oil companies' waste and the dumping of waste directly into the soil, which affects the groundwater. The southern districts are the most affected by their proximity to oil exploration companies. It is known that the activities of the oil companies are based on laws and standards that force them to protect the environment and public health. Yet, the oil companies operating in Ma'rib, according to the People's Assurance, did not take any steps to alleviate the damage caused by environmental pollution, taking advantage of the absence of government censorship, and the patients had to pay the price.
Next. Yemeni fishermen are ensnared in diplomatic dispute with Eritrea. Welcome back. The U.S. Navy seized a shipment of drugs from a fishing vessel valued at about $48 million. The U.S. Navy reported that one of its patrols seized the shipment in the Gulf of Oman, and is the largest shipment since the beginning of this year. The Gulf of Aden Ports Corporation warned of an environmental disaster in the port of Aden as a result of neglect. The foundation indicated that 4 ships belonging to the overseas shipping company are anchored in the port of Aden in a way that threatens navigation in the port, calling for their disposal. The Eritrean Navy kidnapped 6 fishermen from El Hodeidah Governorate while they were practicing fishing activity on the Yemeni waters in the Red Sea. Yemeni fishermen appealed to the United Nations and the international organizations to do their part in the face of the attacks and kidnappings of Yemeni fishermen by the Eritrean authorities. This report has more details.
The tragedy of fishermen in Hodeidah and the liberated areas is still forgotten, and the suffering of the fisherman who is subjected to the most heinous violations in Yemeni regional coasts by Eritrean piracy without any government action to rescue the fishermen in Eritrean prisons, the last of which was 6 fishermen who were exposed to piracy on Hanish Island in the Red Sea.
The pirates loot boats and they fight with fishermen. Yesterday they caught 6 of our friends. Even when I went now to the sea, I found them, and I felt I won't go back to my home.
Despite all these tragedies, the fishermen keep fighting to survive and to maintain the livelihood of their families. But they face other tragedies, which are the high prices and the negligence of the government, in addition to the wind and waves that came to destroy the boats of these poor fishermen.
The Houthis took over the north of the country, and most of fishermen exist in Al Khoukhah Directorate. So the number of fishermen increased due to the displacement of the northern fishermen to Al Khoukhah. So it's considered now the largest gathering point of fishermen among the liberated areas. We wish the local authorities consider this and give some attention to Al Khoukhah.
Al Khoukhah is one of the first liberated areas, and it is considered the interim capital of Al Hodeidah Governorate. It is also considered a shelter for the displaced fishermen, and its coast is the largest point of collecting fish in the Red Sea, and a lot of Yemeni areas depend on it for fish export. And instead of appreciating the efforts of fishermen, they are neglected, and all of them wish the government would facilitate their situation and get rid of whatever obstructs them.
The Houthi militia imposed new taxes on the owners of water wells in Imp. The Houthi step is not the first of its kind, and it comes as part of a campaign that targeted the people in Houthi-controlled areas.
The Houthi militia imposed new taxes on the owners of water wells in the central province of Ib. The Houthi step is not the first of its kind, and it comes as part of a campaign that targeted various segments of society in the militia's areas of control. Informed sources reported that the Houthi levies and financial royalties on owners of water wells come in preparation for celebrations of the Prophet's birthday, and the militia take the commemoration as a means of collecting money that is imposed by force from time to time. Yemen suffers from a water crisis, which is due to the proliferation of cod as a cash crop, which consumes more than 40% of Yemen's total renewable water resources. The rate of groundwater overdraft is currently twice than the recharge rate, and is increasing, bringing depletion of water reserves, inequity, and shortages. It is estimated that 18 million people lack access to safe water and adequate sanitation services in Yemen. The current water network reaches less than 30% of the Yemeni population. Thus, millions of Yemenis, including women and children, need to walk for miles to fetch water.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Presidential Council leadership calls for more international pressure on the Houthi militia. Failure to extend the UN-backed truce could complicate the conflict in Yemen. Cancer patients in Ma'rib struggle to have access to medical care due to the war. This is the end of the news. It was Roshan Fouad. Thank you for watching.